Welcome to Orange County Power Players, where we spotlight the personal, professional, and financial success stories of OC's top leaders. Here's your host, Danny Flores.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Danny Flores with OC Power Players, and today we have Greg Kutzbach with us today. Now,
Thank you.
Hey, Greg, thanks so much. He's a seasoned expert in cybersecurity, GRC, and technology with over 20 years of experience. Greg is a fractional CIO at Exhibit A Cyber in Seal Beach, California, where he supports businesses of all sizes in navigating complex technology and cybersecurity challenges. They practiced incident commander and mentor at the university level. Greg brings deep expertise in leadership, emerging technologies, and innovating efficiency tools. We're thrilled to have him on the show to share his insights. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit, a snapshot of your business now and the journey that you took to get there.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'll just start with the beginning of the journey from a professional standpoint. Started at a company called Goodman Dean Corporate Real Estate. Spent 10 years there working my way up to the IT director level. It was a very high-tech company that worked heavily with the government and with large banks. And that really kind of got me going on the GRC level. It was nothing but SSA 16s and SAS 70s and vendor compliance audits and all that, along with having to run an in-house software development with a secure software life cycle, and then managing all the infrastructure of enterprise IT. So that was beginnings of that. But I wanted to move heavily into security because along the way, I did consulting. And in this consulting realm, I worked with a lot of small businesses, so small law firms and plumbers and electricians and these 20 truck type of places. And I was starting to see ransomware. I was starting to see scams and people losing tens of thousands of dollars and really hurting them personally or through the business. And I had this realization that as a techie guy, your local nerd at that point, there's more that I can do to my career than simply help a business make money. I can actually help people. So I wanted to train into security for more than a skill set, but I went out and got my degree and certifications and all the blah, blah, blah. Right. So that, because in the end, what I learned in security is you get the keys of the kingdom. So people need to have a really good reason to trust you, that you have the leadership, the business acumen, the technical expertise, and the professionalism to be trusted with large amounts of money to spend and the ability to break literally everything. So, so that kind of got me through to here. And from there, it was incident response. My business partner and I, we were doing e-discovery and incident response, so helping lawyers and also working on the digital forensics side, which went hand in hand with incident response. Turned out incident response is probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I hope that most of your listeners have never actually been through a breach. Statistically, I'm going to say that most of them have, unfortunately. But being an incident commander or actually running the incidents, you get to see what actually gets companies hacked, the real deal, what actually happens, what are the real mistakes. I'm sure you've seen these Excel sheets that cyber insurance companies give you that say, I promise that we do all of these things. Well, the reality is a lot of times companies will stretch the truth on those a touch. And so in the reality is when companies are not properly prepared, bad things happen. Either an external threat actor happens, or an internal threat actor, your own employee, happens. You don't have controls in place, and really that went from a technology point of view of, hey, you need to stand up more technology to protect the organization, to the realization that it's really the combination of technology and policy, standards, and governance that work together to actually protect the company. And here I am today. I'm really focused on the reason why I don't pigeonhole myself into a business type is that if I'm working with a business that's in a non-regulated industry, then we get to really focus on what will make a meaningful difference for them versus a regulated industry, which will also have meaningful differences. But along the way, we have to check a lot of compliance checkboxes. That can slow down the process, but you got to do what you got to do because you got to be
Right.
compliant to get the contract.
Right. No, that sounds like a lot of fun and sounds like you enjoy what you're doing. And
Absolutely.
I would assume there's a lot of competition in that field as well. What sets you apart from everybody else that helps you get the growth that you're looking for?
Sure. So one thing that I've noticed in the fractional CIO industry or fractional CISO or vCISO,
Mhm.
it's to most people that's considered synonymous. We won't need to go into the details on the differences.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of fractional leaders out there um, do not have the experience of what it's like to actually configure, run, audit, and give a good sniff test on the environment. I'm a CISSP. I'm proud to be a CISSP. It's kind of a base level certification to be acknowledged by the various HR industries and various HR organizations and places in the world. But I know that a CISSP who doesn't have this depth of experience is a mile wide and inch deep. They can speak on many topics. And
Mhm.
that's really who I'm up against. I'm up against people who can speak on many topics, but they oftentimes don't have the real world experience on how to apply that to actually protect the company, how to optimize so you're not blindly following a framework.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm a big believer in standards and frameworks because I don't like to reinvent the wheel. And by the way, reinventing the wheel is very expensive. I don't do that. But I also don't blindly follow it because again, that's very expensive and I don't do that. So really the high degree of fast tracking you to a significantly less risk state,
Mhm.
while also my business partner Anthony Williams, he has 25 or 30 years or so as a seasoned higher ed CIO, and
Mhm.
so his lifeblood is built around enabling business. So security people don't have a good rap, just to be totally clear. We come in and we say, you're doing everything wrong. You need to buy all these new things. And we're going to make all of your efficiencies much worse than they were, but you'll be more secure. That's the reputation that we security people have. Um, First of all, I don't think that way. I'm heavily business focused. But secondly, my partner Anthony, who we always run these engagements together,
Mhm.
we he makes sure that's not the case. He's really big about business. He understands GRC. He has a deep experience in that. He's been working on his doctorate in these GRC principles, which is amazing. I mean, congratulations to him. He's super close.
Mhm.
But he's all about keeping the business running, which in the end, why are we doing any of this? It's to keep the business running, to keep the revenue flowing, to protect the business, and everything else is kind of surrounding that. So the thing that makes Exhibit A Cyber different than so many of the competitors out there is that we are very experienced in real world application combined with being business first to make sure that we're not just the security people that you end up hating. Get the job done, be efficient.
Wow, no, that's really good. Yeah, because you're trying to get the most bang for the buck on these smaller businesses and giving them that infrastructure that we all need to make sure that our data is secure.
Actually, can I bring up another topic, which I've been having this discussion multiple times lately, and I think it's a really, really good topic.
Okay, yeah.
Um, you said you said small businesses a second ago, and I think the term small business is really interesting. Me and a few of my industry colleagues,
Mhm.
we were discussing what makes a small business a small business. Is it the revenue per year? Is it the headcount? Is it the number of locations? Is it the international or not internet or domestic? Or what is it? I have my opinion, but before I get into mine, I'm just out of curiosity, what do you consider small business? Let's throw it in your direction.
I think a small business would be considered, like you said earlier, like the electricians, the plumbers, the 20 truck shops, anybody who may not be international, and maybe somebody who might only have one location that they work from. That's what I would look at as a small business. Anything bigger, you start having two or three or four different locations. Now you're talking about different infrastructure, with your computers and your personnel and everything else, and maybe you're like a mid-sized business at that point.
I have a different definition. I like my definition a lot. I feel like your
Okay.
your definition is very traditional.
Right?
By and large, your definition is what most people are going to say, and
Okay.
it's perfectly valid.
Right? Right?
Me and a few friends, we have a little different definition.
Good.
Um, okay. My idea of a medium business, I'm going to define a medium business and say that if you don't qualify as medium, you qualify as small.
Right?
Um, is do you have a CEO who thinks like a corporation, who strategizes as a CEO?
Hmm.
Um, Number one, because don't forget, as smaller business, they don't think like a CEO. They think like a professional in their industry who happens to be owner of the company. Two different ways of thinking.
Correct? Correct?
Okay, so CEO thinking like a corporate CEO. Number
Hmm.
two, a CFO who thinks like a corporate CFO. In other words, he thinks of the company in terms of its financials rather than thinking in terms of approving expenses. So a bookkeeper thinks in terms of where are the expenses going, where are the revenues, where's the credit cards currently going, where is the expense accounts currently going. They think
Right?
like a bookkeeper. A CFO is thinking, how can I utilize my capital to achieve corporate strategy and corporate vision?
Right.
It's a different role.
Totally different.
C
100%. Yeah.
CEO, CFO, okay.
Yeah.
Next piece is a conversation about risk. A medium business is actively seeking out to identify and address risk throughout their business.
Hmm.
A small business is not thinking in terms of risk. They're thinking in terms of here, how can I drive more revenue? They're not thinking about how do I protect my revenue. They're just thinking about how do I grow? I'm trying so hard to grow.
Right?
So basically, a medium business is ready for a risk conversation. A small business, it's the last thing on their minds. Um, okay, so there's that, and then lastly, in terms of the mere presence of the C-suite position, chief risk officer or inside counsel, either way. If
Hmm.
you have one of those two, it puts you into the medium bucket. If you don't have a chief risk officer or you don't have inside counsel or outside counsel that you work closely with,
Hmm.
again, that puts you in the small bucket. Again, because again, a counsel, the lawyers are really there to cover your butt. They are there to look at risk that you may not have been addressing and making sure it doesn't bite you. And that's the language that CIOs should be speaking, which is looking at opportunities and addressing risk. Because I really hate the word cyber because it means nothing, including to me as a seasoned professional.
Right?
I really like to think of it in terms of information risk. Where's our risk coming from? And then my buddy Anthony, he's all about business enablement. Put those together, and you have a fully functioning CIO, and the CISO is just rolled up into the CIO role.
Right, right, right. Yeah. No, no, that definitely makes sense because as the business grows from a small to medium-sized business, that the same tools and structure that got them there can't be used for the next level. They have to restructure and get the C-suites in place and think strategically a little bit different.
Mhm.
So that's just to clarify, so anybody who's listening understands that it's just part of the stepping stone that you have to go through as you grow the business, especially if you started the business as a small business and growing up to mid-sized business. So that's really good information. Thank you so much for that. Now,
It really is pivotal to a leadership role of what am I leading?
right, right, exactly, exactly. It has to be operated and run totally different. Yes. Now, what do you guys as CIOs, what do you guys see yourselves that comes easier to you that others find challenging?
Sure. Well, I'm going to speak to myself for a second. Earlier in my career, so when I was earlier in my career as a IT director, without the level of experience I have at this point, I thought that I had to come up with solutions for everything. I had to work very hard and educate very hard on how do I solve every problem and address every risk I could possibly think of. Um, and a transitional point in my career happened when I realized that if I learn how to access the combined knowledge of government groups, private groups, and using frameworks, using standards to my advantage, I don't have to build from the ground up. I can learn how to utilize what's out there, know what's out there, know what to use, what not to use, what to prioritize, and basically what to do with this tome of knowledge that's out there. The things I'm referencing are things like CIS 18 or NIST 800-171 or ISO 27001 or the different risk frameworks. Um, these are all standards. I don't have to reinvent them. So really, one of the things that we're bringing to the table is access to that knowledge, a deep study of that knowledge, and then how to apply it to their business in an efficient way. And one of the things that I love to say, but everyone that knows me and wants me to do well doesn't like me to say is all of this information is out there. If you want it, it's all out there. Most of it is free. It's just a matter of dedicating yourself to learning it, and then the
Right.
rest of it's practice. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm someone who will never be perfect at my job because you're always practicing. You're always trying to get better.
Right, right. No, that definitely makes perfect sense. And that's where your value comes in. Even though it's free, you know exactly where to go and how to apply it. So that's the value, right? That's what they pay
I
for.
I go to businesses all the time where I ask them if they're using a framework, and most of them who are relatively well informed, including a lot of managed service providers, MSPs, is they'll say, "Oh yeah, no, absolutely." I was like, "Oh, what do you use?" Curiosity, not trying to put them on the spot,
Right.
and they say they use a NIST cybersecurity framework, and I say, "Well, that's great. That's really good. How do you utilize it?" And they're like, "Well, we use it all." I said, "Well, what's that mean? How do you do that? What's that mean?"
Right, right,
And
right.
in the end, it turns out for most of these companies, I mean this in the nicest way possible, they've skimmed it. It's sitting on their bookshelf. They've taken the time to print it out, maybe even bind it. Um, but it's not driving their security strategy. Um, so they don't know how to prioritize. They don't know what's most important. They just have this book that says I should be doing all of this. But it does. But well wishing doesn't protect a company.
No,
So
no, no. Yeah, you got to implement it, right?
have strategy, and you can't do it all. It's expensive. It's time consuming. You got to prioritize,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite things to implement or show someone if they don't want to hire me is I say CIS. I love CIS. It's a pseudo government organization, Centers for Internet Security.
Mhm.
They have a book called what's it called? It's like the Guide to Good Cyber Hygiene or Cyber Hygiene, something like that.
Mhm.
And it takes the CIS 18 controls, which are already very simple to comprehend, and it boils them down to please do these things. These will protect most of the attacks. Please do these. It's it's basically please use a framework. Don't invent it all yourself because you're going to hyper focus on what's top of mind, and you're going to forget all these categories that will end up be the things that get you.
Right, right,
Um, and that's what I'm here for. I'm here to think on every single term.
right, right. Yeah, that's why you got it covered, and that's your expertise. So if we have somebody listening that is either doing what you're doing or wants to do what you're doing, what suggestions would you give them to be able to get there?
Now, to be where I'm at, you need to, in my opinion, you need to have worn a lot of hats to be highly effective at this stage.
Mhm.
Um, so really early in your career, shooting to be where I'm at shouldn't be where you're shooting, because now you're in an advisory consultant stage in your career.
Mhm.
Um, the best thing I can think of to say, and I recommend to people all the time, is don't be afraid of becoming very good at something. You don't need to know everything.
Right.
So like I know people who want to get into malware reversing. It's a very specific field. Or people who even will go further and they want to get into embedded system malware reversing. But they say, but I eventually want to be in like a leadership role, like what you're doing. And I say, that's a later problem. For now, focus on what you want to focus on. Become very good at it. Don't
Mhm.
worry if there's a job for it or not. By the way, there is, but don't worry about the job market. People, when you become very good at something, there is a niche for you. It'll usually be very highly paid and very sought after by a small population, which I think is a much better job position to be in than being okay at lots of things that now you're competing against a large population. Uh,
Right. Well, that makes sense. That makes
and,
sense.
and then just as a note, most of the fields in cyber or in technology have surrounding fields around them. So let's say that you want to become good at, oh, let's stay on embedded security for a second. It's a very niche field. You're securing IoT cameras or something, embedded stuff. You're thinking all you're learning about is a circuit board with a camera on it.
Right.
How could this apply to enterprise security, Greg? Come on.
Yep.
Um, well, excuse me. So the way that that can apply is that when you're building your lab, when you're learning how to test on these things, you're having to stand up an environment to ingest the logs out of your IoT device. You're standing them up in Azure. Where are the logs going? They're going into Sentinel. How are you reading them? I'm learning how to write in KQL. What development platforms am I working on? I'm working on Linux. I'm working on Windows. I'm working in multiple languages. Learning how to use let's say like Go. I want to go into memory safe development. Um, there's all these. I want to do this in a virtualized environment. So I learned how to stand up my own Proxmox box and stand up my own servers. I'm a poor college student, so I go off and I buy a refurbished machine. It doesn't have enough hardware. Now I have to learn hardware. Guess what? I just named off like a dozen essential areas of specialty in order to do the niche piece.
Right.
So you don't actually have to go after all of those. By becoming really good at your piece, you'll pick up so much surrounding knowledge
Right.
because you're being really good at the one little piece.
Yeah. No, no, that's, I think that makes sense. You're kind of going to be forced to learn everything else automatically so that you become an expert in one specific
Mhm.
field.
That's it.
That's really good advice. Yeah, so what has been one of your biggest challenges in getting to where you're at now?
Um, I think especially in the small business category, which I love that conversation. I'm glad we had it.
Right.
And especially in the small business category, having the conversation to try to get people actually serious about all this is very, very difficult. Because basically what it comes down to is education. Um, if you educate people enough, they'll realize that protecting their business is important, and it doesn't have to cost a fortune. It doesn't have to be crazy complicated. Um, and that's the eventuality you want them to come to. I don't even care if they hire me, but I want them to know that protecting their business is important. I don't care if you're small. You still need to protect yourself and the hackers out there or your employees. Either one are both threats. You're not too small to get hacked or to get scammed. So that's the hardest part is because it's an education piece. I don't know if you've seen all of these advertisements all over your social media feed saying use MFA, use a password protector, buy this all-in-one antivirus solution. It's endless advertisements and education out there. Yet it doesn't get through people's heads. So that's a multi-million dollar advertising and education effort, and it's still not successful. Me, small company, small business,
Right.
I need to somehow do what those multi-million dollar education pieces can't do. That's a big ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so essentially what I've come up with um, is I go to networking groups, I go on podcasts, I talk about these things. I do my part. And the people that want that see the value will reach out.
Mhm.
And that's the best you can do.
Right.
Most of the people that are going to reach out are ready to have that risk conversation. You can't force them to have that beforehand.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, there's a really dark piece of humor in my industry, which is the only way to get people to actually give you the security budget that you need is for them to have a major security incident.
Mhm.
I would really love to help people before it gets to that point. It's
Right.
much cheaper to fix it beforehand.
Yeah.
But the reality is that's how it works.
Right. No, I totally agree. I think that's the way it goes. So it looks like you've done well, very well. You're heading in the right direction. You're happy with what you're doing. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And so some, business owners such as yourselves, um, always thinking ahead a little bit and like to, aside from their regular business income, to invest passively to set themselves up for retirement, or maybe they want an additional stream of income. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of investing,
Investing and, growing revenue, personal revenue, and just kind of looking at the future for yourself. Um, what do you see, or what do you like? Anything specifically?
oh, sure. Well, in terms of long term, you can't go wrong with the classics. There's the real estate and your blue chip and a properly diversified portfolio. Um, as far as extremely high risk, high volatile, that's not really the style I like to work in.
Mhm.
And other than that, I'm a big believer in specializing in what you're good at and outsourcing what you're not. And so I have some really great people that I surround myself with to give me advice on financial investing decisions.
Mhm. That's
So
great.
I would say just like any other business,
Right, right,
find people who are very good at what they do and then listen to them.
right. No, that definitely makes sense. So as we wrap up the interview, what does 2025 look like for you?
I think probably one of the more interesting changes to this business I'm coming up with some new strategies on with some new groups of partners I'm working with is excuse me, one of the one of the interesting new pieces is you've probably heard of cyber insurance, right? Business insurance, cyber insurance,
Right?
and everyone says you need to have it. and and it has requirements, and you got to make sure you have those requirements. And that's pretty much the depth of conversation that everyone's having around that topic. Um, Me and a few other people are working together to build a way of growing cyber maturity in order to support better cyber insurance, less expensive, better coverage, lower cost cyber insurance that's unique to the market. And I
Mhm.
think that's going to be a really great piece because most people are utterly confused by that topic. It's very important. I told you I did a lot of incident response. I still do, by the way.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and one of the first questions I ask people once I see that something real is happening is I say, do you have cyber insurance? More often than not, the answer is no. And I think the US stat on that, it's over 75% don't have cyber insurance. And now this incident that will be happening commonly costs the customers I'm around two or $300,000. Typical incident, and that's a lot to swallow for a small business. Um, and so I'd like to make a big dent in that problem. And I think by helping them through that problem instead of having to tackle it all themselves, 2025, me and my team we're gonna give people some great tools for that. Some self-serve, some consulting, but definitely more than just these PowerPoints that are so I'm sorry to everyone who's giving them, but meaningless.
Right. No, no, that's good. That's great. Which leads me to the next part, and just to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. But I think it's super important, Greg, that they're able, somebody who's listening to you is able to reach out to you. What's the best way somebody can get a hold of you if they wanted to pursue something like this and get your insight?
Sure. You can get me on LinkedIn, Greg Kutzbach. or you can send me an email, greg@exacyber.ai. So greg@exacyber.ai. Either way works great, and I'll get right back to you. And you might have noticed from this little chat, but I'm a bit of a talker. I'm always up for a good conversation. So
Right. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on, Greg, and thanks for your contact information so that if somebody who's listening to us can reach out, get a hold of you, whether they want to talk about cyber insurance or anything else in their infrastructure, I think you'd be a great asset to be able to have a conversation.
thank you very much. This was a really good time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Orange County Power Players. Want to share your success story? Apply to be a guest at ocpowerplayers.com/guest.